Welcome to Grief, Grace, and Gratitude. I'm your host, Rhonda Kemp. On this podcast, we will be sharing our grief journeys with one another. Each one of our guests will talk about the loved ones they've lost to overdose, as well as the impact of substance use disorder. As you listen, you could write down and share with us a question or discussion topic that you would like to see us include in our future episodes. Just as it says in the book of Psalms, chapter 34, verse 18, "The Lord is near to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit." My hope is to bring comfort to those who are crushed in spirit. As we talk about the shame of addiction and devastation of loss, we want you to learn how to survive and even thrive while navigating through the difficulty of grief. Thanks for joining us today on Grief, Grace, and Gratitude. I have a really special guest, John Lally from Connecticut, and I'm excited to share with the audience today his journey through grief. Like mine, he is down the road after losing a child to an overdose, and our purpose is to reach an audience that may be grieving alone, just to bring some healing and hope and some answers, hopefully, in how we have gotten myself 10 years past losing my daughter. And there were days and months and years in there that I didn't think I would ever get to a place where I could feel a normal life again. You know, there's before you lose your child and after you lose your child. And I've heard you say that too, John. I read a little bit about you, and it's just a tragedy that none of us ever want to experience. So we want to, yeah, it's just, it knocks you down to a place you really don't ever want to be. And I know I worked with a lot of people in grief just due to overdose. So it's a different kind of loss too, because of the way they passed. So, John is a, retired psychiatric nurse. He has a nonprofit organization that he started, and after he lost his son Timothy, and it's called. Sorry, my notes are here.
Together.
Together. Yeah. So tell us a little bit.
Very
I said start talking about Today I Matter, because that's an interesting title for one.
yeah.
It's a little bit about it.
Well, after my son passed, this past January was 8 years. So it's quite a while, but as you know, it seems like forever and it seems like yesterday at the same time. I needed to do something. You know, I felt when Tim passed, it made no sense to me. A beautiful young man, so much potential life ahead of him. How he left this world way too early. And for many of his last 10 or dozen years or so, he suffered quite a bit emotionally. It was a difficult struggle. And then when he passed, is to me, like, I couldn't think of a way to make any logical sense of why and how could that happen to a good person. Um, and so I needed to try to to make some kind of justification in the universe for this happening, because it made no sense to me. This is not supposed to happen, as you know. Parents are not supposed to bury their children. Well, it goes against nature. And and for me, I felt like I needed to do something. I needed to be active. Um, that's part of how I dealt with my grief, and how I'm still dealing with my grief is through action. Um, and using my professional experience, I worked in mental health and substance abuse for almost 40 years now, and very different various sessions from hospitals to outpatient to a private practice. So I felt like I had some knowledge there, both professionally and now personally, that maybe if I can impart that to other people and help them with their struggle or help them prevent another such struggle, then that would somehow, it would never, it doesn't even out the loss of my son. Nothing could ever do that. I don't mean it that way, but it helps honor his life honor his struggle in a way that makes it more meaningful than just the loss of a beautiful young man. Because of his loss, it forced me, it put me in a position where I felt I needed to be active and I needed to do something to try to help other people.
Yeah.
And I
So
think
so
we've
when you
done, I'm sorry.
I think that's a commonality that, we feel is their life meant something. And, like you say, you grasp, just trying to find a reason in it, and then activity brings a lot of healing to us because we're not just thinking of ourselves anymore. We're thinking of
Right.
other people. So that's just something to commend anyone that uses this grief as a purpose. So go ahead and finish.
And for me, it every time I mean, I've been doing this over 7 years now through Today I Matter. And every time I feel like I reach someone or someone says, thank you for speaking out, or thank you for giving me the space to talk about my loss and it's difficult. As we know, as you mentioned earlier, this specific kind of loss has difficulties that don't come with other losses specifically. And a lot of that has to do with the stigma. For a lot of families, they don't talk about it because they're ashamed and embarrassed to admit that someone in their family had drugs. So they stay silent. And that's the worst a person can do. Um, and so every time someone comes to me and says, thank you, or I appreciate what you guys are doing, it allows me to talk about it. It helps me with my loss of Tim because it gives his death and his struggle more meaning and more positive. Because now, if he hadn't have struggled and died, I wouldn't be doing this right now in the same way. And so maybe I wouldn't have reached that person. So it's getting passed along now. Um, and it's all because of his struggle. It came out of his struggle. So it's my way of making something positive come from a horrible situation. And we're
No,
just started.
good. I think too, I've had the same experiences where people say, I'm so glad that you're here for us to have this Zoom call or, just talk about our kids for a 10-minute period of time because people don't talk about their loss and they don't talk about addiction, like you said. So a lot of people just stay in shame and stay quiet. And that's the worst thing that can happen. So when you're sharing and people come up to you and they get that opportunity, you see the relief in their face that someone understands because here you are a nurse or a nurse that has
Yeah.
psychiatric background and you couldn't save your son from overdose. And a lot of parents feel responsible. I know I did. What did I do wrong? How did I stop this? And
Sure.
I didn't have any knowledge of addiction. I wasn't at all in the medical field or knew where to go to get help. So I know someone like you with the credibility of your practice that you had a lot of knowledge about addiction. And
Yeah, but it's still, I don't know if that even compounded my guilt at first because I figured I should have known. I should have known what to do. I should have been able to save my son. I went through that for a long time. I won't say I'm totally over it, mhm, but well, I've gotten more acceptance that I did what I could. Knowing what I knew then, I did what I could. I believe that. I love my son so much that I would have done anything. If I knew something different, I would have done it. So I've come to that acceptance, but it took a long time. It was a long time. Where did I mess up? What did I miss? So briefly, when I started the organization, it's just a small family-run organization. I wanted to keep Tim in the center, and so I had the idea of using his name, Tim, to come up with an acronym. I wanted something that really fit. So we came up with Today I Matter for TIM. So all of our logos have TIM on it. So Tim stays there.
okay.
Mhm. And at first, it was just like maybe kind of a clever acronym.
Mhm.
Keep it name, but it's grown to mean so much more. We have wristbands that say "Today I Matter," and little pins that we give those out to remind people when you're struggling. I want you to look at this and remember today you matter. You matter to someone. If no one else, you can look around and think you matter to them. You matter to us just because you're a human being who struggles. And for people
But
who are not struggling, but know someone else who's struggling, they matter because they can make a difference. So that's fine. We're methods these days.
Mhm. And, dealing with mental illness too, the last thing that people think is they matter, that we get so isolated in any kind of mental illness and depression. So that's a great message.
Sure. I mean, my son Tim, his way into drug use was his mental illness. He suffered from depression, deep depressions, and anxiety with panic attacks. This panic was so bad that some mornings he couldn't get out of bed. He'd just be a ball of tears. I can't do this. I can't manage the day. It's horrible. And he managed to get to work sometimes. And one day someone gave him a pill. It was probably a Percocet or something like. And Tim told me later on, he said, "Dad, I felt so good that day. My anxiety went away. I felt like this burden had been lifted off my shoulders and I could get through the day." And that was so tempting for him that he had to do it the next day and the next day. And we know one pill turns into two pills, turns into 10 pills. And before he knew it, he was addicted and he couldn't live without it. And his whole day was wrapped up around getting more and using more and how to get the next time. How am I going to get through the night without it? And it just destroyed him for years. So, but it started with like a lot of people, doesn't have to, with trying to survive mental illness and get some way to relieve some of that emotional pain.
Mhm.
Well, you
And
mentioned one other thing I want to say about people keeping silent. We do a vigil at the Connecticut State Capitol building every year on August 31st, International Overdose Awareness Day. And we have a memorial poster project. And right now we have 640 2 by 4 foot posters or faces of people who are passed. And we set them up on the front lawn of the Capitol. And we do this every year. Well, one year this woman came up to my wife and she was crying and she was talking about losing her son. She said, "I lost my son 2 years ago, but I didn't have the courage to come last year and talk about it. I told people he died from asthma because I was ashamed and embarrassed." And my heart broke when I heard that. This poor woman, if she couldn't talk about what happened, she couldn't get support. She had to suffer in silence. And that's the worst thing that a person can do when they're grieving is suffer in silence. So things like you do and we do are just making it easier for people to talk about these issues and not stay silent so they can get the help and support.
right. And I go back to my reasoning when I started being active in, meetings and helping people understand grief. I always wondered what Lacey would think, like, would she want me to be ashamed? Would she want me to stay silent? Or would she want me to help people? And she wanted to help people get sober because of her addiction to opioids. She said, if I ever get past this, I'm going to talk to other people and try to help them not go down this road. So, what would our kids want us to do?
Yeah. When in the beginning, I worried about that myself because Tim was a very private person. Because at his wishes, we didn't even tell family members that he struggled with mental health or drug issues because he was embarrassed and we didn't wasn't our place to open that up to him. That's not what he wanted. Um, and so I wondered sometimes, when I'm talking out loud, I'm telling his story now to the world, anybody that will listen. And I wondered if she would be happy with that. But then, like your daughter Lacey, Tim, when he was in treatment, he loved it. And he would drive other people to 12-step meetings. He would go around picking up people because he wanted them to get help. So the more I think about that part, where I think, maybe I hope he would be proud um, because we certainly, our aim is to treat all people who struggle with compassion and dignity, which he struggled with. There were days when he was in the midst of his addiction where he would just say, "Dad, I'm a loser." He felt he was a loser. "I can't beat this. I must be a loser. I must be worthless." And
It's
that's
such a
horrible.
shame.
That hope is the worst thing.
It is, and our society, our culture's been taught that the people on the streets that are dealing with mental illness and drug addiction, they're just bad people, they just make bad choices. And I have
Right.
my own family members that told me, and myself at times, if she would just have better character and make better decisions and not be so lazy and not be,
No.
keep a job, it's just simple things. You want to shake them and say, why are you destroying your life? But it is a brain disease. And
Like,
there are people that can take that same Percocet that your son took and not have the feeling that he had when he took it. So it is a reaction, the way that the brain functions in a person with substance use disorder. And I've learned that since, but we do look down as a society.
yeah,
That's
a
true.
little fixed reasoning in your judgment and your impulse control. So if you're having problems in those ways, you're not going to make healthy decisions for yourself. You just can't. But people look at him and say, why don't you just do? You know, be honest with you. When Tim was struggling with his active addiction, he never was able to live on his own. He was at home right until he was 29 when he passed. Um, and, and initially, I had a very hard time as a father because of my own ineffectiveness, my own inability to save him, to make him better. Like some men do in the beginning, I, 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 it was a little embarrassing, but I'll admit I acted with anger at him. I said, Tim, you're just not doing what you need to do. If you just do what they're telling you to do, you're going to do better. I might have even said, why do you keep screwing up? And
Oh,
my heart
I
went,
understand.
"Well,
I
you do
understand.
it. But I did treat him like that. So in some days, he might have felt like I was reinforcing him feeling like a loser. And my journey through my grief and thinking about about how it affected me has been such a transition that to realize how that was the one thing I did wrong. I didn't
It
treat him
really,
with enough. I lost
it's
that because of my own frustration. I allowed myself to lose that perspective, and I lost my compassion. And it came back only later.
that's the worst, this child is still your little boy, I mean, you're still parenting an adult, but you feel like you're parenting a child. And
Right.
we do get frustrated with them. And, I was a very big critic of Lacey. I was there constantly to be with her and love on her, but I also was judging her. I was a big judge in her behavior. And it breaks your heart afterwards because you wasted so many times that you could have been more supportive and loving, and now we teach, detachment with love.
Mhm.
'Cause when you're dealing with a person in addiction, active addiction, you have to learn to love them, but not enable them. So you have to not push them away, not ignore them, but show them you're there for them, but also don't do everything for them that they should be able to do. So
Right.
it's a tricky road to
It
walk
is
as
hard. You want to show you love them, you love the person, but you don't love the behaviors. And it's important if you can figure out how to make the difference. That I still love you. You're my son, I love you very much. I'm not happy about what you're doing. I wish you were doing things differently. You are making some mistakes, but I'm going to love you no matter what.
sure.
And
I
I'm
know,
going to
yes.
any way I can help or will be here, but I can't do it for you.
Yeah. And a lot of people ask me, well, at what point do I not let them come back to their bed? That I have a bed right here that they could sleep in, but at what point do I not let them come in my house anymore? And, it just breaks your heart because they're struggling with, do I let him in and steal my things again? And, my other kids don't want him around because he's so abusive and disruptive. And, it's just, it's more than a parent is qualified to do, I believe. We're not equipped. Now, you might have been more equipped. I don't know. Did you have another person in your life that you had to deal with like that?
No,
You know,
I had no experience in my life or my extended family with anyone with addiction outside of cigarettes, maybe, but no alcohol or drugs or anything like that in my family. So even though, even though I dealt with it professionally, it's so different on a personal level. And my professional relationship, I didn't have the same personal connection and the same investment as a father in my client as I would in my own son. So it changed my perspective. It threw me off.
and,
I really
I feel like I've had a real awakening to my fault since Lacey passed because it can't, you have to look at every part of who you are as a person when your child dies from overdose because you're analyzing, well, should I have moved her out of that school? Should I have not gotten a divorce when I did? Or, you look at everything you did through their entire life, and it really awakens you to who you are in a whole different way. So we try to look at the upside. There's no upside to losing your child, but you do have to move through this life. So you try to have a reason to hope and find the healing. And but going back to Timothy, do you know now what that depression was about? I mean, I'm sure you've tried to understand, why did he have anxiety to begin with? Is it just something they're born with, or what's your opinion on that?
Well, I think as a psychiatric professional, I do believe that some people are born with the propensity towards certain vulnerabilities emotionally. It doesn't mean you're born with some kind of gene saying you will get depressed, you will get anxious, but you're born with you're kind of set up with vulnerabilities. And depending on your interactions as you're growing up, it might hit on those vulnerabilities or not. And that's why it could be hit or miss within the family. Tim, one thing that I could look back with Tim, he was a very big guy, not just heavy, but extremely tall. He was in grade school, he was so much bigger than his other friends, and he was embarrassed by that. You see Ricky sometimes, he looked like he's hunching over. He's trying to shrink down to not stand out. And he had a very meek personality. So because of those two things, he was bullied some. You know, what is obvious, I couldn't see it, but he started to believe it started to affect his self-esteem. He felt like he was less of a person. Even growing up, he struggled because of difficulties with peers. I think that was certainly part of it. And then he had some vulnerability that my other son, Brendan, too, also struggled with depression and anxiety. Not as bad as Tim. So I think there was a genetic component there. And through Tim having difficulty feeling good about himself because he felt other than his peers by his size, he had a hard time fitting in.
Yeah.
And I think that just compounded things. And then, you know, and teen years is right in high school when I really starting to show symptoms of anxiety and depression. And we took him to therapists, we took him to psychiatrists, we tried all different medications, and nothing seemed to help very much. He never really had a decent, good day until he got tried a Percocet. Those first few days were good, he said, and that's why people do drugs. He would never do them a second time if they didn't work the first time.
Right.
Well, the first time you get it, you'll do repeat. If you don't get it, you're not gonna do it again. But for him,
Such a great Yeah, there's such a great reward for them to take that, and then
it's
they
so
spend
seductive.
years. Yeah, then they spend years just trying to get that feeling back, and, with
Someone told me someone told me once about Tim eventually progressed into heroin, and he was even doing injecting heroin near the end. But someone else told me when they first started using heroin, they said it felt so good. It felt like I was wrapped in a warm blanket. I felt this warmth and calmness come over me. And you can imagine for someone who's emotionally vulnerable, how seductive that is. That heroin kind of tricks you. It pulls you in and says, I'm your friend. I love you. And then it takes over, and then you're under its command. It's such a horrible disease.
It is, and we see so much of it. I think it's just busting out. I mean, there's so much substance use disorder now compared to 20 years ago, 30 years ago. The numbers just keep going up higher.
And see, I've been doing a lot of research on this too. And in actuality, the estimate of young people using drugs has actually gone down the last 2 years in a row. But the death rate has gone up. And that's because the drugs they're using are deadlier than ever before. When I was a kid growing up, I wasn't a drug user, but I knew a lot of people who did. I knew no one who died though. drugs were not as dangerous as they are these days. So even though maybe right now, I'm glad fewer young people are doing dangerous drugs, more are dying, especially because of the fentanyl. They don't always know what they're getting. And it doesn't take much, sometimes the first time you take fentanyl could be the last time.
Yeah, and it can be in anything off the street.
Right.
Yeah. So when you go back to what you've been able to accomplish in 7 years with your nonprofit, what do you see in the communities? Do you think there's more help for people? Are the rehab centers growing? Are there more resources for people to to find?
There are somewhat more resources because there are groups like yours and mine and team sharing. There are a lot more of those kind of grassroots groups now that if you do a little bit of investigating, you can find one if you're looking for help and support. 8 years ago, that really didn't exist. So I think it has changed in that way, but it's from
That's
the ground up. From the top down, there's not a lot of difference. It's still difficult to get someone into treatment when they need it. It's still difficult. Sometimes they're battling insurance companies for payment. Um, those things are still problematic, even here in Connecticut and in most places. You can't, if you go into a hospital with a heart attack, you're already getting an appointment with a cardiologist right away. Yeah. If you go in with an overdose, you might see, we call, coaches, recovery coach, but they'll give you a card. They give you a business card. So you leave with a business card. Hopefully you'll find somebody to help you, and that's it. We don't treat these illnesses like other illnesses. So there's a lot to be done still in that realm, Rhonda. We're not doing enough to help people. And I think
right.
some of it starts with the stigma. Our main mission is to reduce the shame and stigma because there's still stigma in the government and society that these are people that brought it on themselves. Why should we spend our money to help them when this is the life they choose?
Yeah.
And until we can break that down more, we're not going to get the appropriate funding and help that we need, I believe.
Yeah, that's the main message is it is a disease. It's not their choice to they don't grow up and say, I'm gonna become a great drug user, and disappoint my family and be full of shame and despair for the rest of my life. I mean, it's just not their choice. It really isn't.
I mean, I said to somebody once, people, the first time they pick up, it's a choice. I get that. They choose, but at that moment, they choose to make that decision. But once they're hooked, their ability to choose rationally is taken away from them. And when I tell people, my son wasn't having fun doing drugs. Maybe the first couple of times, but in the midst of his addiction, he's just trying to survive. He's desperate every day, feeling like, I don't know if I get through the day. That's not fun. That's not partying. People think they're all partying all the time and having a good time with their great drugs. That is not the reality, as you know.
That's a
They're
good
suffering.
Yeah, that's a good point. They're not, like you said, just living the good life on their couch. Just because they're high doesn't mean they have joy and that's where they just need to sit there and relish in it because they're trying not to be sick. Their goal is to get up out of bed and not be sick. And they steal and lie and everything they can to get that drug. But um when you when you lost your son, because it is a shameful topic and people don't know what to say, a lot of your closest friends, if you're like some of us, they don't know what words to use when they're facing you with this condolence. Who was able to come along beside you and help you in those early times, if you can remember what people were there for you to support, or did you have that?
Well, it started off that it was good that my wife and I were both on the same page. The day Tim passed, when it was time to write an obituary, we both looked at each other. We said, that's it. No more secrets. We're putting this into obituary that he passed from a heroin overdose. And we don't care what people are going to think or say. Our secrets are done. We were proud of our son. We're proud of what he tried to do right. and we're proud of ourselves as parents. So we tried to set that tone. We were very fortunate that most of our family were supportive of that. There were a couple of people in the family that, you know, really, how did you let that happen? Like as a parent, you let this happen. And one person in the family who came and be all angry. Why didn't you tell us? If you had told me, I would have talked to them and everything would have been fine. I said, really? You think your conversation would have changed everything? But they didn't understand. They're well meaning, but they didn't understand. So, but we're very fortunate that most people, at least in our family, supported us because they knew Tim enough to love Tim and knew he was a good guy.
Yeah.
So we were very fortunate. I know not everyone has that surrounding, that support.
Mhm.
As I said,
It's so important.
that woman who had to tell her family he died from asthma. Some people, that's the way they live, that they can't talk about it. And so unfortunate that didn't happen. We
Yeah.
certainly got a lot of that from the general public, but by then we were just determined, I don't care. I don't
Yeah.
care what you think. I know my son. I love my son. You're talking out of ignorance when people would say something's cool.
And people don't know what they don't know, and we did the same thing. I had Lacey's, counselor speak at her funeral because we knew there were her friends that were using drugs and alcohol in the audience at her funeral, so we used that funeral as a time when the counselor could speak about her addiction, and she had a journal she wrote in that talked about what the addiction felt like, and we read part of that journal, so I think you really just step out of that awareness of what do people think about me anymore because it really doesn't matter. And that leads me to the next thing is how do your priorities change after you lose a child like that?
Well, it, it's certainly, as you know, it changes your outlook on just life as a whole, how precious it is, and how we have to find a way to find gratitude for every moment we have, because we don't know how many moments we're going to have on this earth. And for the other people that we have in our life that we love, I have my younger son, Brendan, who also struggled with opiate use, but now has over 5 years of sobriety and he's doing very well. I just have so much gratitude for him. He just brought a new grandchild, my first grandchild, 2 months ago into our lives, and
Well,
it just means it's so much. Um,
yeah,
I just need to focus on going forward, and in a way where I can honor Tim,
right,
you know,
right.
and looking and really, like I said. But what's changed? Two things. One is I have to remember gratitude every time I wake up in the morning. There's an opportunity. There's a possibility. There's the precious of being alive. Yeah, none of us know how long we have on this earth. But the other thing, that's really changed, as I said, through my evolution as a father, from going from anger to compassion. I really try to share that story for people so that uh, we can really promote compassion. I talk about like I said, we talk a lot about stigma, mostly related to mental health and addiction. But I was talking to a group once and saying, if you really want to bust stigma, you can't stop at mental health and addiction. You got to make it across the board, not to judge people. People,
Right.
I really will believe human beings are doing the best they can, given what the resources that they have and what their knowledge base is. They're doing the best they can. No one sets out to screw up today. That's what I'm going to do. So if you start with that compassion, whether it's, where you are on the political spectrum or the gender spectrum or the race spectrum or the money spectrum or whether you use drugs or not or mental health, we got to just not judge people. Step back and say, people are doing the best they can. Let's listen to treat them with compassion and try to figure out what's going on in their life. That
That's a
there's
mm,
some
what a great message because it doesn't stop with just judging people in substance use. We're judging all the
broken. We
yeah.
start there.
Right, that's very good. Good information because if you like you say, if you start your day with gratitude, and with me, I have to go back to my faith in God. That's a big part of it for me. because
Mhm.
I had moments after I lost Lacey that I know I was being carried 100% through it. I couldn't have done it, without my faith and without the spirit of the Lord that came so obviously to me. But yeah, if we just start with gratitude, that's going to change our mindset. And we always have something to be grateful for, even in this tragedy. So, when
Whereas so I try to find gratitude that I had him in my life.
right.
There were days he made me laugh. There were days we really enjoyed times together, and nothing could take that away. I had that in my life. I had Tim in my life. I had his presence. I had his love, and that could stay with me forever.
It's amazing. It's amazing how sharp your memory gets too when you have to. I was afraid I would forget things about Lacey. Like, it terrified me that I might think, I can't remember what it was like to touch her hand, or I can't remember how she smelled when I hugged her. I was terrified, and it's never happened. I mean, I have more memories of her, and they're so vivid, and I can still get those moments where I can just almost feel and touch her again, just because
Well,
it's so vitally important to remember who they were. And like you said, they were a gift. What would our life have been with I had Lacey 30 years. She was my only daughter. I mean, amazing friend, amazing journey with a beautiful person. So, not everyone lives to be 85 or 90. We have to accept that. And
that's true.
so good. You said Tim was a musician too, didn't you? Did he? Did he have a band? Yeah.
Well, he had a band, but they're just a bunch of friends. He never played professionally, except for one time. There was one day they got a gig in Hartford at a battle of the bands at this big theater. And of course, I went to see him, and I got it on videotape and all. And he thought he was a rock star. That was one of the only days, maybe in the last 5 or 6 years of his life, that he smiled all day long. He felt so good, you know. And I'm glad I have that on videotape. I'll remember that all the time. That was him. It was like, I'm a rock star. This life is great. For one day, he could experience that. He deserved that.
That's awesome. So when you speak now, you're speaking to medical societies and different of what type of places do you go to share? Uh,
I will share anywhere. I've spoken to church groups. I've spoken to Boy Scouts. I've spoken to nurses associations. I do speak at the medical school in Connecticut every year to first year medical students. Well, I've done grand rounds at the Hartford hospital system here for doctors and therapists. So I've reached the whole gamut. I've gotten enough. I've spoken enough in Connecticut that I've gotten a little bit of a reputation for someone who knows what he's talking about. Because even though I've been in the profession, since Tim passed, I've done so much more research and studying to learn about addiction and families and how to help it. And in fact, I'm doing a talk in October at a national conference, well, recovery conference, on how to involve families more in recovery, how important that is. So that's my biggest job right now is just kind of helping to educate anyone that will listen, basically.
yeah, I love that. And how can people help if you're watching this podcast? Can they get on your website and become a support for you on through that?
Sure. We have our website. It's todayimatter.org that talks about what we're doing. And it also talks about different things we do. Like next month, we're doing our eighth yearly our scholarship for our local high school. We give that $2,000 scholarships to people going into art or music because
Oh,
those were Tim's loves. And we believe art and music can be very healing for someone. So we do that. We do our memorial poster project, where, like I said, we have 640 posters now with people who have passed. And we do displays around the country. We've been to Washington, D.C. and the National Mall twice, putting faces to the numbers to make this personal, to make it real. So that really helps promote compassion. Well, so those are things we do. If anyone's interested and like to have their loved one part of our project, there's instructions on our website how to do that. Um, and so that takes money. The scholarships take money. I don't take any money for my professional talking, but we could always use donations to help in those ways. And if people would like to have their loved one part of our memorial project, which you can see the whole project on our website, there's instructions there on how to do that. We're also on Facebook too, if people want to follow us.
That's wonderful. That is the good side of social media. There's so many ways you can reach out and touch people with all these avenues. So what would you say to someone right now that's kind of sinking in their grief, someone that doesn't have the energy to go be active and doesn't have the support of a great family? There's people that get suicidal after they lose someone that's close to them.
So,
What would be your best words to someone like that?
well, I want you to hear that if you can, it's hard to believe early on that you can survive this. In the beginning, you just don't, I don't know how I'm going to do this. I don't know how I'm going to survive. I remember thinking that. And here it is 8 years later, and I've survived it. I'm still suffering from it, but I've survived it and I'm able to go on. So, first thing is to understand the, the way it feels right now, it's not going to be as intense forever. You're going to have what's going to hit you in waves, certainly. Even 8 years from now, there are days I feel like, wow, it's so heavy on me. But it's not like every day and every moment like it is in the beginning. So I hate to use the word easier because it's never easy. It gets less intense. It gets less overwhelming. I like to say that the grief, you're able to, as time goes on, you're able to compartmentalize it. It doesn't take up your whole mind. It takes up a smaller amount. So that allows room for other things. Other things, where you might find one day you actually smiled at someone's joke, or you smiled at something beautiful that you saw, or you felt love for somebody. That after a while, you start to have room for those things along with the grief. So you're able to find a way to live with it. And if you can just hang in there, but please find someone to talk to, even if it's online. The online group like Team Sharing is wonderful. They're around the whole country. You can go on Facebook, you can Google them and find someone always to talk to if you have no one else. But if you have no one else in your family you trust, you can get online help. But if you can't afford it, if you can find a way, sometimes we need professional help, a professional therapist in your area. Sometimes you can find them at a reasonable prices, even if you don't have insurance, because you need to talk about it with someone that you trust. Don't stay silent, please. That's the
The way
worst.
I picture it for myself was I felt like I was in a really dark circle, like the pain was just engulfed around me. And after a while, I felt like my circle got a little bigger. The dark circle was always there, but I was able to get a bigger circle around that circle that was involving using the love I had for Lacey, trying to honor her and trying to make her proud of me. And, then all of a sudden you have a little joy in that and that just grows into a bigger sphere of
Right.
life. And it's a new life. It's not the old life you had.
No, it'll never be the same, but it can be worthwhile still.
It can be very worthwhile, and, that I should bring up what we do with Hope is Alive Ministries. We have Hope After Loss, and that is through Zoom calls we do twice a month. We have in-person meetings in Oklahoma and Wichita here where I live, and North Carolina has a group. So we're trying to spread that for in-person meetings. But if you're sitting somewhere where there's no meeting, you can get on Zoom calls, and we do retreats. So we have weekend
Awesome.
retreats for people to just get away from everything and talk about their loved one and share what has worked for other people, and they walk away people after our retreats walk away with new friends and new hope and healing and a tool bag to go home and say, "These are the things I'm gonna start doing to feel better," and so, grief doesn't have to be the end. You don't have to die in it, and,
Well,
yes.
learn-
So what is it about Tim that, was something special to you? I know so many things that you can't put into one or two sentences of what Tim was to you, but what did you share with him that you feel like you can't share with other people or that made your relationship special?
We had lots of similar likes. We both had a very similar love of music. Certainly, him being so much older, some of the music he liked was not my favorite kind of music, but we found music that we really enjoyed together. So we would just really do that. We went to concerts together, and we were both football fans. We're both Dallas Cowboy fans, and even though we're from the East Coast, somehow that happened,
How
and
that happened.
we we shared our joys and our frustrations. Well, very often, and we would go to games, and he's a Red Sox fan for baseball, and we go to baseball games together, and just great days, just times where it makes me smile to think of it. Those things that are said, when we said, I'll always have those memories in my heart. That really happened. That was a reality. It happened, and it's true, and it stays with me. So I'll always remember those times with him, and he made me laugh. He was very witty.
So
So,
funny.
that might sound sarcastic to some people, but I had to laugh. He was so quick-witted. He was funny.
I always hear the greatest stories about people's kids. Like they seemed like they had commonalities. The people that had addiction also had these other traits that were the biggest hearts. They would give their shirt off their back if they could help someone, and they were funny. And when they walked in the room, everything kind of lit up, and they drew people to them. They had special gifts that way. And maybe they lived such big lives in the small amount of time they were here too. I always think Lacey lived a lot of life in her 30 years. She did some things that maybe other people never got to do. I mean, you have to weigh out the balance of a short life lived, but lived fully, because she was the kind of person that exploded when she walked into the room and people
Really.
wanted to be her friend. Yeah, she was a very magnetic personality. So we can be proud of who we had as our children.
That's for sure.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I don't know what we didn't cover. I want to think about practicing self-care. What what do you do for yourself if you have those bad days right now? Do you have I know you're doing a lot for community and awareness and
Well, that's mostly my self-care is being out in the community and being involved. Because that again, when I'm feeling down, that gives me something positive to hold on to feel like there's a reason to keep going. There's my motivation. It feels good when I realize, we had an impact. Let me tell you a quick story.
Mhm.
Last year we had our memorial project down in Washington, D.C. We set up on the National Mall like 640 posters. People just walked through them. This woman sent me a message through Facebook or something the next day. It just said, I have to tell you, I saw on the news that your project was going to be in Washington the same day my husband and I were there. And I thought, this is crazy. Why are people honoring people who are drug users? She said, I always thought they get what they deserve. Why are we doing this? She said, but the next day we happened to be walking down the National Mall. We came upon your exhibit. And she said, I have to tell you, it changed me. When I looked into those faces and I saw people just like myself and people in my family and people I know and realized that they're no longer with us and their struggle with drugs were related to that. He said, it totally changed my mind. When she showed me a photo, she took one of our bracelets, Today I Matter. And she said, I'm going to wear this now every day and tell other people that people who struggle matter. And that my heart was just full. I couldn't believe it. That's exactly what we hope for. And when we know that we probably reach people we don't know because not everyone will tell us that. But when someone comes back to us and gives us that message, it's like, oh my gosh, this is why we do this. I can't wait to do it again. And
yeah,
that,
I
that
want to
feeds me.
that's the fuel right there. Yeah.
Yeah.
And what will that woman bring to the table when she's out there working? It just like you said, it's grassroots, bottom up. It's the everyday person that when you see that man lost his son and he was a good dad from a good family, and they're not just a certain type of people that get into this position. They're not always that picture we get of an addict. And usually they're not actually. Um, so Is this nationally covered, the event you do there in Washington? Does it have national coverage, news coverage when you do it?
We've done this a couple times before. We haven't gotten national coverage. We've gotten our local coverage out here in Connecticut, and there's a TV station in Washington, DC that's covered us a couple times. I'm always trying for national coverage. I haven't figured out how to break through what yet.
Yeah, hopefully that happens, and I would love to come to that event sometime. That's gotta
Well, we
be
plan on being back there next spring. And for people who want information, to follow us on Facebook or on our website. The dates will be there, and it's so the first time we did it, it was so much work. By the time we were ready to go, I said to my wife, "I can't do this again. This is just too much." But by the end of the day, I turned around 180 degrees. I said, "My God, we got to do this again." It was so powerful and so meaningful, and it's worth all the work.
life-changing.
Mhm.
It will change lives, and, that's what it's all about because someone else's daughter and son will overdose soon, it's a guarantee this thing is gonna continue, and, we just have to change the message, the messaging, and, we with Hope is Alive, we get a lot of support from churches, and we're trying to which is great, I mean, that's wonderful, but we're trying to get just a bigger audience, just more community, more awareness because the program works. It's sober living houses for 18 to 24 months is where the people with substance abuse go with Hope is Alive. And
Yep.
that when they call that phone number, they keep them on the line till they find a treatment center. Even if it doesn't work for them to go to a Hope is Alive ministry house, they can go, they find them a place to go. So it's that
That's what
very you can't give them that card from the hospital. They've gotta have a place to get on a bus somewhere, to find a treatment center, to get sober enough to go into I mean, it's a process, but if people want to learn about how they can help, Hope is Alive Ministries is it 87% of people that complete that 18-month course stay sober. So,
that's an amazing statistic. You don't see that most places. That's
very
cool.
work. It's a great outcome. Getting them there is the hard part, but,
Yeah.
I'm just thankful there's some resources, so okay, John, we should do this again sometime. You have
Well, I'm happy to do this one. It's been wonderful talking with you and getting our message out there. That's why we do this. We appreciate to give you another avenue of getting the message out.
we will definitely put all of your, links in our comments and have people share and just keep spreading the good word of what you're doing. Okay, well, I will talk to you later.
All right. Take care.
Take care, have a blessed day. Thank you so much for joining us today and for being a part of the Grief, Grace, and Gratitude community. Remember, God has not forgotten you, your dreams, or your broken heart. Join us for our next episode, available wherever you listen to podcasts. To help us reach more people, please like, share, subscribe, leave a review, and follow us on social media. Those links are in the show notes. What will you trust God with today?